I was 63 years old when I finally understood that the people who love you the loudest aren't always the ones who love you the most. It took my daughter-in-law, a delivery driveway, and 8 words spoken to a man who wasn't my son to teach me that. Welcome back, family. Maybe you're driving home from your shift right now. Maybe you're in bed with the lights off, phone propped on the pillow. Maybe you're standing at the sink, with dishes half done. Wherever you are, tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight. And if these stories mean something to you, stay with me, because I have more to tell. My wife's name was Carol. Everyone at the shop called her C, because she signed the invoices with a single looping letter, and the guys thought it looked like a little wave. Hello. For 29 years, Carol and I ran Whitfield Auto Salvage out of a 5-acre lot on the edge of Muncie, Indiana. We started with one tow truck and a hand-painted sign nailed to a fence post. Carol handled the books. I handled the yard. And somewhere in between, she built a reputation that outlasted both of us. If a young couple came in looking for a transmission they couldn't quite afford, Carol would find a way to knock $40 off before I even walked over. She never asked me first. I'd find out weeks later, going through the receipts, wondering why a part rang up short. She kept a metal cash box under the counter, unlabeled, and every payday she'd slide a folded bill or two into it. I asked her once what it was for. She just said, "For whoever needs it before they know they need it." That was Carol. She saw people's hard days coming before they did. One winter, a kid named Dominic Reyes started sweeping the yard for us after school. 16 years old, quiet, showed up with the same coat every day, no matter how cold it got. Carol noticed he was walking 2 miles home in the dark because the buses had stopped running that late. She never made it a conversation. She just started, accidentally, having me swing by his corner on the way to drop off parts every single night for a year and a half. Dominic never asked why. Carol never explained. It was just something that happened, quietly, the way most of the good things she did happened. 4 years ago, I lost Carol to a stroke. She was gone before the ambulance made it to Ball Memorial. 63 years old, and I buried a woman who had spent 29 years convincing me I was better than I actually was. After the funeral, I sold the salvage yard within the year. I couldn't walk that lot without hearing her voice calling out invoice numbers from the office window. The sale gave me more money sitting in an account than I had ever seen in my life. And that's when I discovered the one thing Carol had always managed and I never had to: restraint. I never learned how to say no to my son. His name is Marcus. Every single time Marcus needed something, a car repair, a security deposit, a temporary loan that never got repaid, I had my checkbook out before I'd even asked a single question. I told myself that's just what fathers do. Looking back now, I think I was scared. Scared that if I stopped handing things over, Marcus would stop calling. Marcus was 36. He'd been married to a woman named Simone for 5 years. On paper, they looked like the couple everyone envies. She posted vacation photos. He drove a car he couldn't quite afford. And every Thanksgiving they showed up looking like something out of a furniture catalog. Marcus worked in medical equipment sales. Decent money, commission-based, nothing steady. Simone hadn't held a job since the wedding. I used to tell myself she was between things. I never once asked what those things were. It happened on a Wednesday, the second week of June. I remember because the Pacers had just been eliminated, and I was half watching the post-game recap with the sound down when my phone rang. Marcus's name on the screen. He sounded like a kid on Christmas morning. "Dad." We found it. The house. He told me about a place out in Fisher's new development. 5 bedrooms, a finished basement, a pool that was still under construction but would be done by August. He described it like he was reading off a real estate listing he'd memorized. The price was $780,000. They needed the down payment locked in within 12 days, or the builder would release the lot to another buyer. And then Marcus said the sentence that undid me completely. "Dad, I know it's a lot, but you always told me you wanted us to have the kind of house Mom would have walked into and just cried, you know? Happy crying." I didn't think. I didn't ask a single follow-up question. I said yes before he'd even finished the sentence. The next 10 days turned into a blur of appointments, my financial advisor, the trust attorney, a dozen signatures on documents I barely skimmed. I was pulling money out of the very trust Carol and I had built together, brick by brick, over 3 decades. And every single time the pen touched paper, I told myself I was doing it for her. That this was the last big gift I'd ever give as her husband, on her son's behalf. The following Tuesday, I sat in my truck outside First Merchants Bank holding a cashier's check for $200,000, the down payment, plus enough cushion to cover closing costs. I stared at that envelope on the passenger seat for a long time. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the last thing I do for Carol's boy with Carol's money. I could have wired it. I could have mailed it. Instead, I decided I wanted to hand it to Marcus myself, put it directly in his hand, and watch his face when he realized it was real. Maybe that's old-fashioned. Carol used to tease me for exactly that kind of thing. Thursday evening, a little after 7:30, I pulled into the driveway of Marcus and Simone's townhouse over on Cardinal Ridge Drive. The envelope sat on my passenger seat the whole ride, like it was watching me. It was one of those thick June evenings where the air feels like it's pressing down on your shoulders. I parked at the curb instead of the driveway, out of habit more than anything, and I walked up toward the side door, the one that opened into the kitchen, because that's the door our family always used. The kitchen window was cracked for the breeze. I was maybe 15 feet from the door when I heard Simone's voice. She wasn't upset. She wasn't crying. She was laughing, low and easy, the kind of laugh you save for someone who already knows all your secrets. Then I heard a man's name that wasn't my son's. Preston. I stopped walking. I stood there on the little concrete path, my shoes suddenly feeling too loud against the ground. Simone said, "Preston, relax. Once the check clears and we close on the house, none of this is going to matter anymore." I didn't move. I don't think I even breathed. Then she said, "He won't check the account close enough to notice what's gone. He never has." My fingers tightened around that envelope until the paper started to crease. And then she laughed again, and she said the sentence I will hear in my sleep until the day I die. His father is basically throwing the money at us. It's honestly kind of sad how easy it is. I stood in that driveway holding a check worth more than most people make in 3 years, listening to my son's wife talk about my dead wife's money like it was something she'd already spent in her head. I didn't knock. I didn't walk in and demand answers. I didn't call Marcus standing right there on the porch like every part of me wanted to. I turned around. I walked back to my truck. I drove home in silence, and I did not sleep that night. For the first day or two, I tried to talk myself out of what I'd heard. Maybe I only caught half a conversation. Maybe Preston was a coworker, a cousin, a name that meant nothing. Maybe fear was filling in blanks that weren't actually there. So, 3 days later, I called Marcus and asked him to grab dinner, just the two of us, at a steakhouse off 96th Street we used to go to when he was in high school. Halfway through the meal, I asked him, as casually as I could manage, how things were going with Simone. He looked up from his plate. "Good. Why?" There was something behind his eyes when he said it, not quite doubt, but something close to it, like a part of him had been waiting for someone to ask. I didn't push. I wasn't ready. I didn't trust myself yet to say what I'd heard without blowing his whole life apart on the spot, based on 8 seconds through a kitchen window. So, instead, I did something else. I called an old friend, a woman named Rita Okafor. Years back, when a supplier had been shorting us on parts counts, Rita was the private investigator Carol and I hired to sort it out. I gave Rita 2 things, a first name and a street. "Preston," I told her. "Cardinal Ridge Drive, near the townhouses." I asked her to find out everything she could. It took her 11 days. Preston Hale was 34. Turned out he and Simone had dated years before she ever met my son high school sweethearts, who drifted apart when he moved out of state for work. About a year and a half into Simone's marriage to Marcus, the two of them reconnected on some app neither of them thought their spouses would ever hear about. That wasn't all, Rita found. She discovered that Simone had been quietly siphoning money out of a joint savings account. Marcus almost never checked small at first. 200 here, 300 there, and then bigger transfers once the house deal started moving. And there was something else, something that made my stomach turn. Simone had been browsing rental listings in Savannah, Georgia, 2-bedroom places. Marcus's name wasn't on a single application. She wasn't nesting into that $780,000 house. She was building an exit, and she planned to fund her way out using my wife's money. When Rita laid all of it out for me over coffee at a diner on Broadway, I expected to feel rage. I didn't. What I felt was something colder and stiller than anger, almost peaceful, like a decision had already been made somewhere inside me before my conscious mind caught up to it. I understood, finally, that I had spent years mistaking generosity for love, and I was done making that mistake. I still had the check. I hadn't put a dime of it back into the trust. For 6 days, I just sat with it, in a drawer in my nightstand, because I needed to be sure that whatever I did next came from clarity, not from spite. Carol always said decisions made in anger were just decisions you'd have to make again later, more carefully, after you'd cleaned up the mess the first one made. So, on a Thursday, I drove to see my attorney, a woman named Deborah Kessler, who had handled Carol's estate 5 years earlier. I told her I wanted to restructure the entire gift. Not to punish Marcus, he hadn't betrayed anyone. He'd simply trusted the wrong person completely. But I was not going to hand $780,000 of Carol's money into a house that was going to become someone else's getaway fund. So I changed everything. I moved the money into a new trust under Carol's name, the Carol Whitfield Fund. Half of it went toward a vocational scholarship program at the community college, where Carol used to volunteer teaching bookkeeping classes to single parents trying to get back on their feet. The other half went to Dominic Reyes. Yes, the same Dominic who used to sweep our lot and ride home in the dark. 15 years had passed. He'd built his own small auto repair shop from nothing, working out of a rented bay that flooded every spring. He'd been turned down for a small business loan twice, once over credit history that wasn't even really his fault. So I gave him the rest of the money, no strings, no interest, no repayment schedule, enough to buy the building outright and never worry about that leaking roof again. The $780,000 that was supposed to buy Marcus a house became something Carol would have actually recognized as hers. Marcus didn't get the house. He got the truth instead. The following Friday, I called him, "Come by the house tonight." When he walked in, I didn't ease into it slowly. I laid the folder on my kitchen table, bank statements, the transfer history, screenshots Rita had gathered, dates, everything laid out in black and white. I let him read it himself, page by page. I didn't want him thinking his father was exaggerating out of some old man paranoia. I wanted him to see it with his own eyes and draw his own conclusion. I watched my son's face change while he read. His jaw tightened. His hands started shaking slightly around the pages. Finally, he looked up at me, and his voice cracked in a way I hadn't heard since he was a teenager. "She's been talking to him for over a year, Dad." "I know," I said. Then I told him what I'd heard through that kitchen window 3 weeks earlier. He just stared at me. Then he asked the question I'd known was coming from the second I decided to show him everything. "Why didn't you tell me right away?" I gave him the only honest answer I had. "Because I wasn't sure yet. And I wasn't going to drop a bomb in the middle of your marriage on the strength of 8 seconds through a window. I needed to know for certain first." Marcus confronted Simone that weekend. She didn't bother denying it once the documents were in front of her. There wasn't much room to. But what happened next told me more about who she really was than anything Rita had dug up. She wasn't upset that she'd betrayed my son. She was furious that she'd been caught. She wasn't devastated the marriage was ending. She was livid that Marcus had told his father. "You told your dad?" That was the line she kept repeating, over and over, according to Marcus. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I made a mistake." Just fury that the wrong person had found out. Not Preston. Not the missing money. Not the apartment listings in Savannah. Me. The fact that I knew. They separated within a month. By early fall, Marcus had filed. I wish I could tell you Simone eventually showed up at my door, tearful, apologetic, ready to admit what she'd done. She never did. From what Marcus told me later, she moved to Savannah alone that October. Preston's own wife found out about the affair around the same time everything else unraveled, which I'll admit I did not shed a single tear over. Simone still tells people, apparently, that I ruined her marriage. Maybe that's the version she needs to believe. In her story, I'm sure I'm the villain who ruined her happy ending. I've stopped losing sleep over that, because I learned something else along the way. Doing the right thing doesn't come with a guarantee that the person you protected your family from will ever admit you were right. Sometimes you do the right thing without an apology, without a thank you, without any closure at all from the person who caused the damage. I made my peace with that sitting on my own back porch. Not hers. Mine. And then something happened that made the entire decision feel worth it, all over again. In November, Dominic finally closed on his shop building. He called me the morning he got the keys, and his voice was shaking on the phone in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. He said, "Your wife changed my whole life and never once made a thing of it. I don't even know how to say thank you for this." I told him he didn't owe me anything. And then he said something that stopped me cold, standing in my own kitchen. He told me that every year since he opened his own shop, he'd kept an unmarked cash box under his register, just in case someone walked in short on money for a repair they desperately needed. He said he had no idea that had been Carol's habit too. He hadn't copied her. He'd just grown, on his own, into exactly the kind of person she always hoped people could become. That meant more to me than the money ever could have. Marcus and I talk almost every Sunday now. He moved into a modest 2-bedroom rental off Allisonville Road. Nothing fancy, nothing anyone would photograph for a holiday card, but it's entirely his. He earned every square foot of it. Nobody is spending money he didn't work for. Nobody is quietly counting down the days until the account gets thin enough that they slip out unnoticed. He told me recently that for the first time in his adult life, he feels like he's standing on ground that's actually his own. I think that surprised him more than the divorce ever did. As for me, I didn't get a tearful reunion. I didn't get an apology out of Simone. I didn't get to watch her sit with any real regret. And somewhere along the way, I stopped needing any of that from her. I don't check to see if she's called. I don't look her up online. I don't lie awake wondering what version of this story she's telling other people at dinner parties in Savannah. What I have instead is quieter, and it's better. Most mornings I drive past Dominic's shop on my way into town. The lights are already on by 7, same time Carol used to unlock the office at the salvage yard every single morning for 29 years. Sometimes I just sit there in the truck for a minute, engine idling, and think about her. And honestly, that's enough for me now. The money finally landed somewhere she would have been proud of. Maybe that's the real ending to this whole thing. Not revenge, not getting even, just finally putting something back into the right hands, the way she always would have. If there's one thing I hope you take from tonight's story, it's this: being generous with the people you love doesn't make you weak, and helping someone doesn't make you a fool. But love without any boundaries at all can quietly turn into something that isn't love anymore. You can care about your children with your whole heart without financing every mistake they're about to make. You can help the people in your life without letting them treat you like a bank they never have to answer to. And sometimes, the most loving thing a father can do is finally learn how to say no, not because he stopped caring, but because he finally started caring about the truth more than the comfort of staying quiet. If this story meant something to you tonight, hit that like button, subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and tell me down in the comments, have you ever overheard something through a window, a door, a phone left on the counter, that changed everything you thought you knew about someone in your family? I read every single comment, every night, no matter how late it is. And wherever you're listening from tonight, thank you for sitting with me through this one.